Então, boa tarde a todos. A esta conferência do Faithful Rights. Desde já agradecer ao Dr. Ibrahim Salama e ao Dr. Michael Wiener por aceitarem participar. Agradecer ao Mostafa que organizou... Oi. Desculpem que vou desligar aqui o som do YouTube, que isto está-me a fazer confusão. Portanto, agradecer aos dois convidados, agradecer ao Mostafa que organizou esta conferência, foi por proposta dele que aconteceu, e acontece no âmbito do CHAM, Centro de Humanidades, num dos 9 grupos que constituem o CHAM, o Grupo Sociedade, Política e Instituições, e em especial no subgrupo de instituições religiosas, em que se integra, no fundo, este projeto sobre o qual os nossos dois apresentadores vão falar. Então, o Dr. Ibrahim Salama, que é diplomata, tem desempenhado funções de embaixador e atualmente é membro de várias iniciativas e participa em várias iniciativas e grupos de trabalho, nomeadamente como coordenador do OHCHR, Faithful Rights Initiative, que define, no fundo, as responsabilidades em termos de direitos humanos de todos os atores das diversas fés, pelo que o Ibrahim foi dizendo, das 3 religiões monoteístas. Não sei se estou a dizer bem, Mostafa, desculpa. Depois é o Dr. Michael Wiener, que, para além de diversas posições e cargos em várias instituições académicas, está desde 2006 a trabalhar com esta iniciativa do OHCHR. E, portanto, penso que posso dar a palavra aos colegas. Mostafa, achas que sim? Falta mais qualquer coisa?
Não, apresentar em inglês e depois começarmos.
Apresenta em inglês também?
Sim, e depois começarmos.
Welcome everybody to this session of the Faithful Rights Conference. This is held in the CHAM Humanities Centers and especially in one of its research groups, Society, Politics and Institutions, and one of the work in the context of one of the working groups, religious institutions. We will have as speakers Dr. Ibrahim Salama, that is a diplomat, a former ambassador, and currently member of various initiatives and working groups, namely as coordinator of the OHCHR Faithful Rights Initiative, which defines the human rights responsibilities of faith actors. Next, we will have Dr. Michael Wiener, that besides several appointments and commitments in various academic institutions, has been working in the same project since 2006. So we will give a start to this conference. Okay, you will have the word, Dr. Salama, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luís, and thank you, Dr. Mostafa, as well, for this great opportunity. I want to say I am certain that it's not my first time in the University Nova in Lisboa, because in one of my earlier life, when I was ambassador of Egypt in Lisboa, I visited your university and I met the director then. I'm just very bad in dates and in names. So, and I had a tour in the university, and this was in the framework of my mandate at that time as an ambassador. But talking about faithful rights, there are also 2 origins that do not jump to the eye, which are linking Portugal to this initiative in a way. I remember vividly my 4 years as a diplomat in Lisbon, in Restelo, where one of my most impressive first impressions about Portugal, and this was the time after the Gulf War, was that it was a capital of international dialogues of sensitive natures. And I was really impressed about the number of foundations, academic hubs, universities who used to organize top-level debates. So I'm very happy to be back into this diplomacy of webinars now, not conferences anymore. The second link is President Jorge Sampaio, because when he finished his mandate as a president of Portugal, and I had the honor to be accredited to him for the first and last time of my ambassadorship life. And then when I finished Portugal, Lisbon, and moved to the United Nations, he also finished Lisbon and moved to the United Nations, at that time in a capacity as special representative for the dialogue among civilizations. And we had many fascinating intellectual and legal and political debates when I had the honor of meeting him in Portugal. And then when we both were in the United Nations in different capacities, that issue of the tensions between religions and rights was among the main issues that we discussed together. And these discussions were the very first seeds of the reflection about what is and what should be the place of religion in human rights law. And here we are not talking only about the freedom of religion as a human right in itself, as per Articles 18 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but religion as it relates to all human rights. What is the relationship? And we started this demystification, unpacking of the ambiguous relationship between the two most obvious supreme values in the lives of millions of people, their religious beliefs on one hand, and their human rights on the other hand. Why on earth has there been so much tensions between these two so much cherished values? And at the first time, and Michael's background is freedom of religion and also freedom of speech and hate speech. So he was our key intellectual machine in the Office of the High Commissioner on these two issues. And at that time, I was coming, and I remain with the background of the treaty monitoring bodies who monitor states' compliance with their human rights obligations, including Article 18, and including the tensions between religions and human rights. So at that time, our thinking in the Office of the High Commissioner was to try to demystify this relationship, because there was a huge political controversy at that time related to the famous World Conference Against Racism in 2009, which is the notion of defamation of religions, which raised a lot of confusion. And one of the main ideas that Michael and I were working on in the Office of the High Commissioner was to try to better understand Articles 19 and 20 of the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Article 19 is freedom of expression. Article 20 is the state's duty to prohibit incitement to hatred. And in between those two articles, there was this notion of defamation of religion, and it keeps repeating itself since the famous Danish cartoons in 2006 till the current events and controversies in France about the issue of caricatures and the limits of freedom of expression. Religion had a role, and it was never sufficiently demystified with conceptual clarity, with legal soundness, and with a genuine will to come together and to reach a reconciliation, a better understanding, both of the tensions, because they do exist, and the complementarities, and there are huge areas of complementarities which are untapped into. At that point in time, and here comes the impressive role of President Jorge Sampaio, is that in his capacity as special envoy for the alliance among civilizations, he immediately saw the importance and the geostrategic nature of the debate, and he was not only supportive politically, but he was intellectually engaged in this debate. And when we organized the regional workshops, because we tried to understand on the issue of hate speech, how do different countries differentiate and demarcate the distinction between hate speech and free speech? And when we approached the European model, he was the key personalities who inaugurated this regional workshop for Europe. And then that was, Michael will correct my failing memory on the dates, this was something like 2010. And then when we reached the Rabat Plan of Action in 2012, he was with the then High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay. Both of them, as top UN officials, were launching the Rabat Plan of Action that brought this criteria to distinguish the difference between free speech and hate speech, which was our bottom-up study through many experts and in collaboration with President Sampaio has proven that even a continent like Europe, which share a lot of values also politically and the institutional and legal history of the continent, there has still been so many variations and ambiguities as to this important point of human rights law. So in Rabat 2012, we reached a clarification on this distinction, and one of the stakeholders that were addressed with responsibilities were specifically religious actors, that their first duty according to these findings of experts group was not to use religion to propagate any messages of hatred that could incite to violence or discrimination. And secondly, that if such messages of hatred and incitement were formulated in the name of their respective faith traditions, they should be the ones who should stand up and dissociate their faith traditions from this type of speech. And the third responsibility at that time, very concretely, was that faith actors needed to contain the emotions of their followers in case they are subjected to any hate speech, because prior provocation does not justify any acts of violence. And if you look at 2012, with these three clear, distinct roles for religious actors, this applies up till now. And I think many national and international initiatives are taking place within that framework. But this was the very first articulation of the principle that religious actors are human rights actors. And in this capacity, they have responsibilities. And in order for them to fulfill it, they need to engage, to know, to enrich, to implement those responsibilities. Cannot be dictated on them. It's like any corps de profession where the codes of conduct are internally conceived and internally monitored as well, so as the equally important principle of independence of a religious actor also be respected, which is also part and parcel of the freedom of religion. So that's what the United Nations achieved in 2012. And since then, we realized that the role and responsibilities of religious actors is not only limited to one application or dimension, however important it is, as is the case for combating the incitement to hatred in the name of religion and combating religious intolerance and discrimination on the basis of religion, that they should be the first front of defense, not only of the religions, but of human dignity to core, very simply. And not only when believers or shrines or values related to the religion and their followers have been attacked, but whenever anybody's beliefs have been put under strain or under oppression. You cannot be defending a religious value if you do not defend everybody's right to his or her own religious value, even when they differ from yours. So that was the added value of the Rabat Plan of Action in 2012. And then we realized that the tensions continue, and it's something on which I was personally first-hand observer, because as responsible for the treaty monitoring bodies at the United Nations in Geneva, I realized to which extent religion is being invoked as a ground for relativism or for exceptionalism or for rejecting some recommendations, and this was an important phenomena to unpack as well. So with the continuation of tensions, the United Nations realized that it can no longer ignore religion. And like any other influential actor of the non-state actors of the civil society, religious actors have their own dynamics and features and backgrounds, and they need to be studied and addressed as such. So since the success of Rabat in 2012 to set and to provide conceptual clarification and pragmatic tool, which is the famous threshold of Rabat to distinguish hate speech from free speech. And maybe Michael will give examples of where this was applied and how even up till now, modern non-state actors like social medias are resorting to it and finding it useful. Michael will elaborate further on this. But this success of the role of clarifying tensions between rights, there's nothing wrong in tensions between rights. The problem starts when these tensions lead to polarization and to an attitude of a zero-sum game. My right is a priority, your right is less important. My right is right, your right is wrong. So it's not only a war of interpretations, it's a tension between values. So we decided to venture a methodology to reconcile and to unpack and to constructively engage in a debate which is not judgmental, which is not top-down, but rather, as we call it, a peer-to-peer learning approach. With this, we, based on the experience of hate speech, we decided to expand the identification of the areas of tension and complementarity between religion and human rights. And we reached precisely what I think you have in the on the website. We reached the Rabat, the Faithful Rights Framework. The Faithful Rights Framework being a document articulated by both faith actors and human rights practitioners who together tried to see on the basis of the Rabat plan of action how to deal with the tensions in other areas to cover the whole spectrum for human rights. There has been attempts before on sectorial grounds, but the Faithful Rights Framework proved to be the most encompassing framework. So just to give you an idea, what are the 18 commitments? The 18 commitments, number one, is related to freedom of choice, that all religious actors agree as a common ground that the free choice of religious beliefs is a matter that concerns them all. Commitment number two is that this is a common minimum standard, not only among all religions, but also that extends to theistic, non-theistic, atheistic, or other believers, because nobody can judge whether those who choose not to have a religious belief are believers or not. They're believers in their own way, in another set of values, whether humanistic or other. And the third commitment is starts from the assumption that God never speaks directly, with the exception of Moïse, maybe, but it's human interpretation that is our access to God's wisdom. And for this, the commitment number three is to promote constructive engagement on the understanding of religions. It's a never-ending horizon of wisdom that cannot be monopolized, let alone dictated by anybody. This in itself is a democratizing element, which is very important, because ultimately the stereotype of religion is submission, when the mantra of rights is freedom. But in religion, there is freedom essentially. And in human rights, there is discipline too, because each and every human right to it corresponds a duty or a responsibility by some other actor. The fourth commitment is the two extremes in the area of state and religion. One is the notion of state religion and how it's conducive almost inherently to discrimination between people, not only citizens but people in the state. And the second one is a doctrinal secularism, whereby the religion is completely excluded under any conditions from the public sphere. Commitment number 5 relates to the gender equality. And here again, in all of these commitments, the methodology, what was I call the double convergence, was for these religious actors to dig and find into the religious traditions the provisions and norms and codes that deal with this issue, which is expressed in different narrative in human rights world altogether, and we started from the religious narrative, and the idea was to see what are the common substantive element between all religious narratives on gender equality, and then compare it to the corresponding human rights norm. And the result was this commitment, as you can consult it in the Faithful Rights Framework. Commitment 6 is about minorities. Commitment 7 is about incitement to hatred, which is exactly re-encapsulates what was in the Rabat Plan of Action. Commitment 8 is about monitoring interpretation, the borrowing from the human rights world and work, the notion of monitoring, i.e. checking the observance of a standard, which is inherently religious as well. I mean, the conscious in the religious and the spiritual sphere is our self-monitoring in a way. So commitment 8 is about monitoring. 9 is about the judgment, the prohibition of judging others' faith, i.e. theology is not an area where you can discuss from outside its sphere. You have to respect it as it is. 10 is about the political manipulation of religion, and God knows how many conflicts are predominantly motivated by this political manipulation, which is kind of the mirror effect of political populism in the religious sphere, if you see what I say. There is an unholy alliance, quote unquote, between the populists in the political sphere and extreme right-wing politics on one hand, and the religious fanatism on the other hand. They come from the same source and they kind of strengthen each other. Commitment 11 is critical thinking in the religious sphere, which is very important because it's uncommon, although it's inherently at the very heart of the legal tradition of religions. Commitment 12 is about the necessity to reviewing curriculum by its own authors within their own disciplines. Commitment 13 is about children and youth. 14 is about humanitarian aid. 15 is about the non-coercion. 16 is about spiritual and moral weight, leveraging this weight by religious actors. 17, it's about sustained partnership with academic institutions. And I think this very discussion and the new program, which is being prepared within the Institut Supérieur Manuel Teixeira Gomes in Group Lusophone, who are contemplating a kind of dedicated study or zooming on the Faith for Rights approach and methodology to enhance the human rights contribution of religious actors. Commitment 18 is technology. Again, we're at the heart of it, although it's a forced type of technology application when we only use this virtual means because we cannot travel, but God knows that we could have done it also to save the planet. So it's again one of the element of these commitments. And commitment 18 is to use this technological mean to produce knowledge and to share knowledge at a larger scale. So these are in a nutshell the 18 commitments, but again I will end on a self-critical note. We although we felt a huge satisfaction that this was and it's one of the rare UN documents that is articulated completely by non-state actors, including religious actors, on these difficult subject matters. Although it was satisfactory that it brought all these horizons together in a coherent manner, we still felt that it sounds legal and it's still yet another declaration, and this is not what is needed in today's world. So Michael and I worked on something else that for whom I will leave the responsibility of outlining, which is the Faithful Rights Toolkit, which is a tool for facilitators of debates in these areas in order to be able to identify the tensions and reduce their impact on human rights whenever they exist and cannot be removed, but then also unleash the huge potential of complementarity. We started, and here I will end exactly on this note because this is the starting point of Michael, which is we started to pilot and try to see how can this work in practice? How can a legal text ceases to be just yet another declaration and started to be something that we can live with, including injecting interdisciplinarity into this thinking. And with this, and with your permission, Luís, I would hand over to Michael to complete the presentation of the Faithful Rights Framework and Toolkit from that point.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. And it's an almost impossible task. Still, you achieved to put in a nutshell the 18 commitments. We tried to put this also on one page with 18 tweets, and that is actually already part of the an outcome of the peer-to-peer learning that we have been doing over the past 3 years now, where one of the exercises with young faith actors, with young people from across the whole Middle East, North African region, we basically tried to break down these texts, both the legal and the religious texts, and the challenge was basically to put them into a tweet. So you had to put this, to summarize the commitment into 140 characters so that it could be tweeted. And this was actually then refined, and we used it in several rounds. And what I personally really liked best was in one workshop that we could still hold in real life with persons without Zoom in Marrakesh. And there people basically discussed one-on-one these summaries, these tweets. And then several of the young participants, they didn't just take it as an exercise in a workshop, but they themselves immediately tweeted it on their own Twitter accounts, precisely using these messages in their own social media. So I think it's a nice indicative example of how these commitments, so the theory, can also be put into practice. What Ibrahim already mentioned, after the Beirut Declaration on Faithful Rights of 2017, we tried to put this really also into something manageable to facilitate the really tough task of a moderator, of a facilitator of any of these workshops of peer-to-peer learning. And I think what Ibrahim already alluded to, the approach of peer-to-peer learning is really fundamental. It's not top-down, basically someone telling, all right, you have to believe in this, but it's very much learning from each other on a horizontal level, and then basically bottom up. It is basically really trying to influence then also the thinking and the interpretation of religious texts. And let me just give you 3 quick examples from the toolkit, because each of the 18 commitments is then mirrored in a module in the Faithful Rights Toolkit. And there, I just wanted to pick out the module 5 on gender equality, which, as you can imagine, is one of the hottest potatoes that you can deal with in this subject matter. It's really looking into honor killings, female genital mutilation, early and forced marriages, and so on, some of which is not only condoned by religious leaders, but it's really actively pursued. And if you have an early marriage, or if you have female genital mutilation, you can see how may play a role. But at the same time, they may not only be playing a negative role, they can and should also be playing a very positive role. And one of the examples also featured in the Faithful Rights Toolkit is precisely the very positive impact that declarations, that statements, that sermons by religious leaders can have, for example, from Al-Azhar, saying that female genital mutilation has nothing to do with the Quran and is basically not sanctioned, but on the contrary, even prohibited by Islam. So I think such a fatwa, such a legal public statement may have really saved literally hundreds or thousands of lives if then people decide not to force female genital mutilation on their own girls. There are several other examples, but I think it's also very indicative that all these commitments, and that you will see also in the toolkit itself, they are obviously legal self-commitments, but they are always be supported and really reinforced by religious texts. And I think, again, it's a very symbolic and also beautiful way of having religious texts from Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, Baha'i, but also Aboriginal, indigenous, and humanist, atheistic perspectives. And just to explain what Ibrahim already mentioned briefly, but to explain the title, why is it called Faith for Rights and not religion or religions for rights? Because that would have been excluding, for example, the atheistic or the non-theistic believers. And we had long discussions in Beirut in 2017, how to be inclusive and to be all-encompassing. And ultimately, we found that term faith, because there also the humanists, the atheists, the agnostics who participated said, I'm not religious myself. That's part of my humanist atheistic belief. But I also have faith. So I've got the golden rule, I've got various philosophical and humanistic ideals. So in that sense, faith for rights is really putting in a nutshell the inclusive nature of all this. And I think this is also key for any engagement. If you only target the religious leaders, obviously you end up most likely with old men, because that in most religious traditions, there's kind of a patriarchal approach to leadership. But if you basically open it up to basically all religions and beliefs, which is the protected subject matter under freedom of religion or belief anyway, then you also include the atheists, the humanists, all the minorities, the smaller religious communities like the Baha'i or Jehovah's Witnesses and others. So I think this is a key approach of this. The second point, which already Ibrahim mentioned in terms of the not easy discussion between free speech, hate speech, incitement to hatred, violence, and so on, that is focused on in modules 7 and the following ones. And here the Rabat threshold is key. And just also to respond to his allusion in the beginning, this is not just a nice theoretical test that was developed 8 years ago, but it's really actually in use. So the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, for example, in the quite famous Pussy Riot case against Russia, referred to it, as did also several non-governmental organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Article 19, and so on. So I think it shows the actual practical relevance and utility of this test. Also not to fall into the trap of making it too easy for governments to basically label someone as being a hate preacher. So anyone who's critical of the government could otherwise easily be just put behind bars by saying, all right, you're inciting to hatred because you're criticizing the government. And that is one of the rationale behind the Rabat threshold test, to provide guidance and to avoid precisely such undue limitations on freedom of expression. But also several media authorities in countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Cote d'Ivoire are using also this threshold test precisely when considering whether a certain TV station or radio or other media are basically in line or not with the prohibition of incitement to hatred. And also UN field presences and also social media companies like Facebook and others are very much interested. And actually, Facebook has approached the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights precisely to support in transmitting and translating this threshold test. And thanks to this cooperation, we now have available 32 translations of this threshold test. And obviously, it makes a complete difference if you have these documents only available in the 6 official UN languages. And Portuguese is unfortunately not part of these 6. But now we have it available also in Portuguese, but also, for example, in Burmese, if you consider the context for the Rohingya in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, in basically, as I said, 32 languages across the world. The last point I wanted to focus on, also to give you a bit of the feeling of how this is being used in practice. Obviously, for the last almost year now, COVID-19 is influencing all of our lives. And we also obviously had to adapt our methodologies and working methods. So this, the in-person meetings went online, as this one here currently. And in various webinars, we have been piloting and testing this toolkit. So it's also constantly in development. We have basically almost every month a new updated version where we are including additional exercises, references, or using basically the experiences from the piloting. And one obviously also very helpful methodology in this peer-to-peer approach is looking into cases to debate. These are also in the annex you will see in the Faith Rights Toolkit. We have some 6 shorter cases to debate, and also another 6 longer moot court cases. So that could be also of interest for some of your students or in that context. By the way, we also have one moot case which we did together with the Brazilian Center for Law and Religion. So this case, which is also directly linking to the Rabat Plan of Action and to the Faith for Rights framework, is also available not only in English but also in Portuguese. So I'll shortly send you the link to that case, which may be very much of interest also in your context. And the final point I wanted to make is a hypothetical case that we were inspired to put together, obviously with elements from real life. So in the COVID-19 context, where religious minorities are basically discriminated or facing public scrutiny, are subject of hate speech, then a prime minister is also weighing in and targeting one specific community. Another religious leader is chipping in and then also fomenting hate. So I think this COVID-19 case has been very useful for our peer-to-peer learning and webinars, because this was a very good entry point for engaging with both faith actors, with civil servants, with civil society organizations, and so on. And it opens basically a possibility of discussing a presumably hypothetical case And with this story, I will stop, because one of our facilitators, he came back with the feedback from one of the civil servant participants of one of his workshops. And that civil servant said, I very much like this case, but why did you have all these funny names, and why did you have to change all these the territories and the states? Because actually the very same case that you are basically putting there happened in my province. And I think that was not just a coincidence that these hypothetical cases are very real life relevant. And I think that is really the best way to learn from the various actors, from also the challenges that they face, and trying to find really solutions to meet their demands. With that, I go back to Professor Luís or Mostafa.
Mostafa, Mostafa, falas tu agora para terminar. Para terminar, não, continuarmos agora com as perguntas.
Exato, é isso. Bon, voilà, il y a 3 questions. Hein. Voilà, je vais vous les annoncer maintenant. La première question, pourquoi la première réunion a eu lieu à Rabat, au Maroc, et puis Beyrouth, au Liban? La deuxième question, comment l'université peut contribuer de manière pratique? La troisième question, dans plusieurs réunions internationales, l'une des conclusions marquantes est que le 21e siècle sera le siècle de la spiritualité ou ne sera pas. Vous pouvez répondre évidemment en anglais si vous voulez. Bon.
As you wish. I will assume that English is more spoken even in Portugal for the non-Lusophone like me, which I plead guilty for that. I stayed 4 years in Lisbon and I didn't make it, so my fault. I'm waiting for the retirement to recap on this. No, very quick telegraphic responses, and Michael will complement. Why Rabat and Beirut? Rabat was. It's very interesting. So this is part of the unknown diplomatic history of things and names. In my own mind, personally, I thought that at that point in time, it's the Muslim world where most of the tensions lie. This doesn't say that fundamentalism or extremism belongs to one region and one religion, but we have cycles in history. So it was important for me personally to help this critical thinking be planted and coming from there. But in reality, we mapped the whole world. So the workshops that culminated in Rabat was a wrap-up workshop to compare the notes of workshops that were in all the regions, all the UN regional offices. And the simple fact that it was the Moroccan Minister of Human Rights at that time who at the World Conference on Racism, who offered to host a meeting to discuss this tension between religions and human rights. So that's as simple as this. This is the unwritten history of that. Why Beirut? Purely accidentally also, because we were looking for a place where we have a country that has issues of sectarianism, issues of multi-confessional society, and a rebuilding after a war, it's not this typical secular society. It's a society where religion and sects still play. I was going to say unfortunately a too much accentuated role. So we're trying to bring the place of birth of the standards where they have more significance, so to speak. How can universities contribute? I honestly think that the traditional mode of both of preaching in the religious sphere and of advocacy in the human rights sphere have exhausted its limits. This is a personal view. I mean, it's time to really learn from each other. It's time for every convener of a value or an idea to stop feeling how great it is and start to think, what does it mean for others? before what does it mean for him or her. So for me, the peer-to-peer learning and the university is, first, there is the academic freedom. That's strategic advantage one. Second, there is a critical thinking by definition. So if you bring religion and human rights into the academic, under the scrutiny of the academic laboratory and research, you have this self-critical view, which is very much missed in traditional religious settings, so to speak, as much as in the sheer advocacy human rights arena, where people push the horizon more and more than they listen to why is it not advancing at the speed they wish, if you see what I mean. The next century will be spiritual or not, it's obvious. I mean, if this COVID-19 has taught us only one thing, it's that without solidarity and thinking about the others, we are all doomed. So, I mean, it's only pure science that tell us now that if you do not have the right to health for all, it doesn't make you any greater that you're rich and have the vaccine, because anybody else can bring you a new virus wherever you are. So there is, call it spirituality. I want to use even a more neutral term than spirituality. It's the otherness. It is the generosity and solidarity as a duty, not as a matter of tolerance. Of course, that coincide with spirituality. If you ask my personal view, yes, I agree with that statement. But spirituality in the larger sense, and here I draw attention to the fact that the very first sentence on the framework of faithful rights, it's a quote of Jalaluddin Rumi, Maulana al-Rumi, which says there are as many paths to God as humans breathes on earth, i.e., which religion are you talking about? If the destination is the same and the objective is the same, you are on the same path, no matter however you call it or whatever you call it. So this inclusiveness is, I think, a notion that inherently exists in spirituality, but human rights has modernized it, and yet both are conflicting on it. One as a human rights value and the other as a religious value. Unpack the notions, because there was a project which was called Le Grenier des Mots. If you really unpack the words, you will find much more commonalities than one ever imagines when words divide. Michael, what would you add?
So basically, just to the second question that Mostafa asked about how the universities could contribute to precisely this discussion. And I think here, as Ibrahim at the outset mentioned, the commitments 17 and 18 are really already giving really the answers, how the various stakeholders, including academic institutions, can really contribute. And one thing which the Faithful Rights Toolkit puts in a nice 3 M's, M, so just the letter. So it's basically mood courts. So that's what we just discussed also about this, what I also included in the chat box as the direct link to this mood court case from Brazil. That is obviously something very much appealing for example, law students. So we had just last week the Nelson Mandela World Human Rights Moot Court final round in Geneva, which is organized by the University of Pretoria in South Africa, together with the Office of the High Commissioner. And it was really a fascinating, unfortunately only online competition. But again, it gives really so much to law students who delve into one specific, again, hypothetical case, but thereby really get not only the substantive legal skills in learning about freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief, and so on, but also the oral skills, because that is one of the key challenges, especially for non-native speakers, to really be versatile and feel free in arguing such a case in front of a bench of real judges from the European Court or Inter-American Court and so on. So I think that was a very positive example, and people and students who participate in this get really a lot for themselves not only for their CV, but in terms of personal skills. And the other two M's I just wanted to briefly allude to of these three M's, which would really complement and implement the Faith for Rights framework, is a master's program. So if you have, for example, a master's which touches upon related issues, I think here again the Faith for Rights Toolkit can give you quite some tailor-made already modules in that sense. And we've been piloting this with various universities, Oxford, Essex, Amsterdam, Oslo, and so on. And so that could be obviously something to look into further. And the third M is a Mooc, which is a massive open online course. Again, something which is very much democratizing education and making it accessible for people who also may not have the funding to do a master's, for example. And I think, again, if you have a massive open online course in English and, for example, Portuguese, you could also reach a very broad geographical and in terms of also the numbers, very, very interesting range. So I think this is just the three M's that I wanted to put on the table for further brainstorming.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Ibrahim. Não sei, se calhar as colegas querem fazer alguma pergunta diretamente aos convidados.
Maria Luísa não tinha dito que queria em francês?
Sim, pode ser, eles dominam perfeitamente esta língua.
Eu neste momento preciso, talvez preferisse ler primeiro melhor um pouco os documentos, porque há muitas questões, il y a beaucoup de questions qui ont été suscitées par ces communications, mais pour moi, en ce moment, elles sont trop encore et je dois formuler un peu mieux après regarder et avec attention la documentation que vous avez envoyée. Mais merci beaucoup. J'ai apprécié beaucoup et beaucoup appris avec vous. Merci.
Não sei se a Edite ou a Ana Paula tem alguma...
Hello? I'm sorry about my English isn't very good, but I understand better than I speak. So I understand what you said, and you are very clear, and it's a very interesting project, this connection between the religions and human rights. I think you are very clear, and also Luís speak. I'm looking forward to read the documents in the sites you put there, and later maybe I will have more questions. Now I think it's a very good way to know these projects, and the questions that Mostafa put it about the university and has the university can engagements with this project. It was very important. So you have sure I will look for the documents, and congratulations for the program. It's very, very interesting and important.
Many thanks, Edite, and your English is perfect. So really just also to congratulate and say that this is no communication barrier whatsoever. I've just put in the comment boxes in Portuguese also the Beirut Declaration and the 18 commitments in Portuguese. So that obviously may then be a bit more directly accessible also to the students. And if you're interested, I can also put you in touch with a young but very impressive law professor in Brazil, in Uberlândia, who basically approached us, and he did this these translations and also the moot court pro bono. So if that is of interest, it may also be of help to connect also both in Portuguese.
Yes, of course.
Maybe maybe I would add that when you have the opportunity to look at it, especially when you started from the Portuguese language, one of the most interesting potentially experiments that we didn't attempt yet is to try to have an interdisciplinary look at this complex relationship between religion and rights. It has anthropology, it has theology, it has history, it has philosophy, it has law, it has psychology, it has political science, of course. So my dream is to try to look at it. Our attempt was trying to embrace as many disciplines as possible, and that's why when you look at the toolkit in particular, the toolkit was our second chance. It's like students when in the exam you have a chance to a rattrapage, a possibility to get better notes. So that's what we did in the toolkit in a way. And one of our discoveries is that the artistic dimension is very underused in the area of political science, legal science, and human rights law. So you will find that one of the constant exercises that we suggest in the toolkit in particular is inspiring. And I think with students, it exceeded our expectations, because this is the thing that unleashes most the imagination and the storytelling as part of the inspiring and of the artistic approach to human rights. One of the stories that we have, maybe Michael can put the link to the specific page, because he moderated just a week ago at the margin of the Pretoria World Moot Court. He moderated a discussion on a story, which is the story of the father of Professor Christoph Heinz of Pretoria University. And his father is a legend in trying to shift the position of the church in South Africa against apartheid, although this was not the official line of the church. And how Professor Heinz, who is a member of the Human Rights Committee and a great professor of international human rights law, how he qualifies the attempt of his father, the dilemma between the legal framework in which you are part of, and how can you challenge it from within, even if you have to pay a price. I mean, is it consensus objection only? Is it a moral duty? Is it a violation of staff rules? So to speak, by our terms, what is it exactly? So he was telling this story of the story. Then he gave us a story of the story of the story of how this film that Michael put in the toolkit came about, because the grandson of this religious leader, who is the father of Christopher Heinz, accidentally, I will never believe it's an accident, became a filmmaker. So he went to his grandmother and he took all this material and he made the film that you see now in the toolkit. How decades ago his grandfather shifted the position of the church in South Africa. What a stronger way to say conscience is a cross-cutting theme in all disciplines, and if you don't obey it and you get everything, you lost it all. And if you want to change, you can even change history. So this was the subject of this exercise that I think is fascinating, also to involve not only historians and theologians and legal minds into this debate, but artists as well, and historians. I mean, digging into the history of religions, you can find extremely progressive thinking centuries ago, and you find a lot of setbacks with modernity. Where is this coming from? It's a fascinating challenge to answer this question, and you cannot answer it in one discipline. So one of the ideas is to have interdisciplinary approach to this relationship. We tried our best, but we are all kind of prisoners of our own starting points in a way. Even if Michael, and this helped a lot, is a pianist and composer at the same time, so that helped us digging into some unusual waters. But we need more of this, and we need in particular to involve religious actors in an academic setting where they also taste and enjoy the academic freedom and test how it feels to be contradicted constructively. It's not the word of God that you are pronouncing as a religious actor. It's what you think it is, and you may be right at times and less right at other times.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. Não sei, Luís, tem alguma pergunta? Quer fazer ou não?
Então, não.
Está bem.
Estou com meus colegas, de facto. In fact, it's reading your documents. It will bring us further questions, surely. But all I can say is that. Well, I must apologize because we have not so many people attending this conference, which is a shame. But it's my fault because I couldn't make this in time, the publicity for the conference in time. So what I can propose is that we must renew this meeting in a workshop fashion. I don't know. We will discuss it with Mostafa, Edite, and Luísa probably. It will be nice to have a workshop with some representatives of the religious communities of Portugal. I am so sorry because I'm talking like this because I have a missing tooth, so it is a bit difficult for me to speak. So I think it will be interesting to have a wider discussion with local representatives. And we will discuss it within our research group of SHAM, yes, and within the subgroup, our thematic subgroup of religion institution. I don't think. What do you think, Edite? Because Edite is also coordinating this working team on religious institutions. O que é que achas, Edite, de fazer de facto, tentarmos fazer uma coisa com representantes das próprias comunidades e tal, religiosas? Agora passo-te a palavra.
Yes, of course, because yes, it's not a subject for our group, our research group, or our sub-research group. This kind of subjects, and as Ibrahim and Michael told to us, is to all kinds of researchers. So it's an activity, a workshop for the university or for all our research group. It's, I think we can think like a symposium or a bigger conference and open it to all our group. Our group are more than 200 people, and 2 other people interested in this team.
I think just to complement what you're saying, Edite, maybe you're just pronouncing now even the program of this projected workshop. You can encourage from different faculties a presentation on a historical reading of this framework, a philosophical, an artistic, an economic, a political science, an international relations. Because it is predominantly already human rights, but what does this human rights reading of the interaction between religion and human rights, how can it be read by an economist, by an anthropologist, by a historian, by a philosopher, by a political scientist, and by an artist as well? So it can be, each one has a completely different reading on the same attempt, and I am sure that we will all learn a lot about how to improve that approach. And I'm sure that Michael in particular, who jumps on each and every new practice or manifestation or story, can extract from these different perspectives something to add to the toolkit itself, because it gives the wrong impression when you look at the toolkit that it's legal and that it belongs to the United Nations. It's not only legal, and it's coming from all experiences. I would say easily, but Michael will correct me, that more than half of the videos and the artistic expressions and the material exposed is produced by non-state actors and not by United Nations agencies. Anything to add, Michael, on the projected webinar? How can it help what we did already?
Yes, and I mean, I just put in the, again, in the chat box, the really compelling example that Ibrahim referred to about South Africa and apartheid, and really the story of the Heinz family. And by the way, the son is still a member of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. So it's really one of the 18 experts looking into the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which at its heart has freedom of religion or belief, freedom of expression, and the right of minorities. So I think as Ibrahim said, it's not a coincidence that this basically comes with these stories. And again, the artistic expressions are something where you immediately reach not only the heads, but also the hearts. And I think there, if you or your students are interested or have any creative ideas, we would be more than happy to join hands and forces.
Eu acho que já esgotamos o tempo que nos foi reservado. Dr. Ibrahim Salama, Dr. Michael, thank you very much for your excellent conferences. Thank you for your availability, and we are thinking of continuing this collaboration in other forms, workshops, short training courses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Félicitations.
Bye.